Welcome back to the Solitary Practice Podcast. So this week I'm going to talk about the tanks, which I referenced last week. Basically, they are energy storage. I have an entire, rather involved energy storage system. I use it when I need it. Honestly, about the only thing I use it for is emergency situations and to pay off various entities that have done something for me. I like to pay them in energy. They seem quite okay with that, or at least the ones I use it for anyway. I started off, when I initially started storing energy, I started small. I was, again, young. So I had quartz points that I had been given. I think I had 3 originally. I'd been given 3 quartz points, and I used to carry 3 rocks in my pocket with me at all times. I had a tiger's eye, I had an amethyst, and I had a quartz point. And I always had them in my pockets, and I still have them. They're, quite frankly, right on my bathroom sink right now. I carried them for literal decades, and at one point I decided that I needed somewhere to store some energy. Now, I had a bit of a temper when I was young. I didn't necessarily want to keep losing my temper. I was working on controlling that, because control of oneself is pretty much pivotal to how far you're going in your practice. I, for whatever reason, decided that the best thing to do was whenever I got mad, I was going to drain all that energy off, and I was just going to store it to use it later, and at least then it was productive. And I did that for a while until I really kind of maxed out these quartz points. From there, it was I don't want this really cranky energy, I should clean it up. And I developed a system for essentially filtering that energy. So taking the tint of rage, so to speak, off of that and getting it down to a more basic energetic form that I could use it. Now, I'm using quartz points, so there's a certain amplification there. It's kind of like more bang for my buck, I suppose. I stored this energy in something that would amplify and already had a lot of energy. I have a natural affinity for quartz, so that didn't seem like a bad idea at the time, and it still works. I still have those 3 quartz points, I just don't normally use them anymore. They are in with all of my other very random stones, which probably mean nothing to you, but I have quite the collection over the decades. So when those 3 quartz points were pretty much maxed out, it became apparent to me that I needed to do something else. And that is when I decided I would make a holding tank for energy. When I had excess energy, so in the spring here, there's a lot of fluxes, and I could easily siphon some off and save it for later. It's basically like an energetic savings account. I put it in there, and I have gone from basic savings account to high yield savings account over the years, because I keep making changes and adjusting and growing. The ticket here is to put in more than you take out. Obviously, once you have taken everything out, there's nothing else in there. Constantly siphoning off anything. If I am a little unsettled one particular day, if I am just very energetic, I will take my own personal energy and funnel it over in there. Obviously, that's never going to get you to a 4 tank level, and I don't really have like a quote-unquote volume that is comparable. I mean, really, how does one measure the volume of this? You can't really. All I can tell you is I kind of came up with a size that looked suitable to me. And I tried building this in a couple different places. And so I moved it on a couple different planes, couple, different dimensions, just moved it in time and space until I finally found, I guess, what I'm going to call the sweet spot for me. It is an ideal location. And it is essentially in a void, which may seem odd because it can be a void if something's in it. I get that. But it's in a void-like area. It is kind of like a no man's land. I've never seen or encountered or found a trace of anything else in that particular area. Seemed like a good spot to put them, because I don't need anybody stealing all the stuff that I have accumulated. And I'm not necessarily talking about people here. People are not the things I'm necessarily worried about performing energetic theft. There are other things that are far more likely to pick up on vast quantities of energy and come check it out. So I found a location, I liked the location, and then I started to construct a containment vessel where I could put the energy. And it was very crude to get started. It was basically just, I want to say like a bubble, but it was a little bit more substantial than a bubble. But yeah, for lack of a better term, kind of like a bubble. And I was just basically siphoning energy off there and then using the exterior of that bubble to contain it. It takes a while to, I guess, fill it, and you also have to maintain the bubble or the skin that is holding that energy together. If you didn't, it would just disperse because we're in a void-like spot and it will want to spread out. So it takes energy to hold energy. And that was okay for a time. And then I got to thinking about it. I'm like, this is a really inefficient way to do this. I'm spending energy to save energy, which means I'm not saving as much as I could be. And the other thing is I was personally, it's my energy. I guess I was a little territorial or something about it. And so I was using my own energy to contain my energetic reserves. That seemed a little foolish in hindsight, so I decided that I needed to redo that whole thing. From there, I thought, well, I have this enormous amount of energy that I'm storing. And when I look at that now, I kind of laugh because to me that seems tolerable, but not particularly noteworthy now. At the time, I was like, wow, I've got a lot of energy here. Ooh, I'm doing a great job. Anyway, I decided that if I had so much energy there and I wasn't really in any hurry to use it, why was I personally trying to power the containment? Why not tie it into that energy and let the energy contain itself? It took a little tinkering to figure out how to get it to go because you don't want to flood the containment, I'm going to call it wall, so much so that you're basically using up all the energy inside of it, and you also don't want to underpower it where it's so thin that it breaks. Had to kind of find what worked best for that. Then decided I needed more. Like, it held a certain amount of energy, but I had access to quite a lot at that point, and I was basically siphoning off anything that was extra energy. High school has a lot of angst in it, and it was perfectly, I guess, logical to me to steal all of that spare energy, convert it and clean it up a little bit, and then toss it in my tank. So I did that for a while. Needed a bigger tank, expanded the tank, then decided I needed the tank reinforced, did that, then decided it's getting kind of big. I may want to look at camouflage. And then started to consider how I wanted to camouflage this. Basically, if you were in a void-like state and there is this giant ball of energy, for lack of a better term, just sitting there, if anything happened through, they would probably pick up on it. What I needed to do was deaden that out to make it look like everything else in there. Even though it was not, it needed to give off the impression that it was. And you can call that a glamour if you want, or whatever, but basically, I just wanted it to give the impression that it was just like everything around it. And I know saying everything around it in a void space is kind of silly, but it just needed to look like a void, even though it wasn't actually part of the void. I guess it technically was part of the void. It was there, wasn't it? But it was in that space, but I needed to look like it wasn't. Basically had it camouflage itself to appear like it wasn't there. When I say appear like, your first instinct is probably to think visually. I'm not talking visually, I'm talking energetically. I mean, yes, void, no light. Technically, I guess you could consider it dark. That's the easy part, making it, I don't know, match chromatically. The difficult part is making it deaden the energetic resonance. I don't know if I'm saying this right or not, but basically, it has to feel like there's nothing there, even though there's something there, and it's got to feel the same as everything around it. And when there's nothing there, that's a very interesting, I guess, feeling to replicate. So it took a little while to get it kind of tuned in, and I tweaked it a little bit here and there. But I tied that in so that it was essentially powering itself. So whatever energy was in there was basically being used to not only contain it, but then to camouflage it. And over time, I would, I guess, take a look at it, decide that I wanted to change it, or I didn't think that certain things were right, or maybe I learned something new. Wanted to make sure that there was, I don't know, say no sound to it, or any kind of tone or vibration, and how to deaden all of that. And just basically, whenever I had a few minutes, I'd go have a look at it and I'd see if I could improve it. When I wanted to test improvements, I would put it through the similar testing I do with all of my other stuff in a different testing environment. So basically, I would build it somewhere else. We would beat it up, try to break it, compare it, see if anything could perceive it, because camouflage, and then learn from that, and then go. And when I had everything kind of refined and knew exactly what I was going to achieve, then I would take it and deploy it on a larger scale. But everything went through tests first. Not really because I felt scientific, but it's just, again, easier to have the things that you're, I want to say, worried might come across it, actually try to look for it. If they can't detect it, then you're moving in the right direction. That went on for quite some time, and eventually I bumped it up. I added a second tank. Probably the best comparison I can think of is rain barrels. When you have a rain barrel and it catches water off the eaves and you want to add a second rain barrel, there is a system by which you kind of hook a line in the top of one barrel into the other one. And so when it reaches a certain level, it immediately starts to fill the other one. I had gotten to the point where this particular tank was pretty large. It was getting kind of, in my opinion, unwieldy. I didn't want so much in there that there was no fail-safe. If it broke, I would lose everything. To, I guess, insulate against the worry that it might burst, I added a second tank, same size, tapped it in. Basically, same exact premise, camouflage, self-maintaining, all that fun stuff. And so when this one got full, there was no danger of it breaking or bursting from too much, I guess, pressure. It would simply flow over into the other one. And that worked out really well for quite a while. At that point, I was doing a pretty decent job about siphoning things off. I had learned how to use enough of the local energies and everything that I really wasn't needing anything of mine anytime soon, so anything extra, I was just feeding it into there. Once you get going, you're kind of finding energy everywhere, and it's not too hard once you get the hang of it to realize where there's excess and where it's safe to take things from, and where sometimes it's even wise to bleed a little excess off. And I put all that in the tank. I had 2 tanks for a couple years. In that time, I think I might have used from them 2 or 3 times. It was not often. From there, I was in a build mode, I guess. I was building up some protections. I had been doing some exterior work. I have a challenging relationship with a entity of a Jupiterian nature. I think that's probably the cleanest way to put that. And at the time, I had decided that I just wanted a little bit of insulation from this particular entity. And it could be kind of persistent. So I built that reverse electric fence, and I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it before. And as we know from the reverse electric fence, it is not shocking out, it is basically sucking the energy in. What I didn't want it to do was fry my defensive system. And so I needed an outlet for all of that energy. I mean, if you're pulling it into your existing system, that's got a capacity. You could say what you want, but all systems have a capacity and they have a volume. And if you are trying to keep bigger fish out of your pond, sometimes you need something capable of handling the bigger energies. I will say that I don't do anything for one reason if I can avoid it. This is the reason I'm giving you. There's multiple reasons for the reverse electric fence, for the tank thing. There's a lot of reasons that go into it. This is the one I'm giving you. Take the freebie. We won't get into all the other fun stuff I had going on at that point. So I had this Jupiterian entity, and it was being annoying. And I was a little concerned about it. So I took the reverse electric fence system and tied it into my tank system. At that time, I went from 2 tanks to 3 tanks because I didn't care how big energetically something was. I did not want it to max out the capacity to really shock it with a hard pull. If your system is only designed to pull in so much, a certain volume of energy, something bigger than that, it might kind of spark them a little bit, but it's not going to really hit them as hard. I'm trying to think of it's sort of like if you have a really small electric fence versus if you have like one of the big industrial cattle electric fences. You're going to get a zap off the little one. It's going to sting for a minute. It isn't going to completely incapacitate you. If you hit the large cattle one, you're probably going to get like knocked unconscious. I was looking for knocked unconscious. I didn't care what hit my bounds. I wanted that regardless. It didn't matter if it was like the smallest of entities or if it was some huge godlike entity. I wanted to make sure if it hit there, it hurt. So, additional tank was built. Not too long after that, decided I didn't even like the 3 tanks and moved it to 4. Tied it all together. Now, there are a number of fail safes on this system. I have basically pressure relief valves. I have filtration systems. You've got to kind of look at all your aspects as you're going. So everything is camouflaged, everything is insulated. I have my containment, of course. I reinforced the containment on all of the tanks with a completely separate piece of work so that if one failed, there's an additional set of armor to contain it. Then I built, for lack of a better term, alarms into those things so that if something should happen and the first wall of the tank fails, when the second wall or the emergency wall kicks in, that sets off an alarm for me to come and, see what's going on, fix it, do something, whatever. I have filtration systems on the intake and the outtake for this particular set of tanks. And that sounds funny because it's not really like a faucet, but it kind of is. When the energies come from, say, my reverse electric fence in, there is a filtration system there. And that one's pretty involved because we're assuming that if something has smacked that reverse electric fence, it is going to rapidly and forcefully channel a huge volume of energy into the tanks very quickly, very suddenly, with minimal warning. The filtration system is set up to quickly, I'm going to say, rework the energy. So it takes whatever comes in and it reforms it into what I would call bland energy. It's kind of like a base energy. It's not fancy. You lose a little bit, I imagine, because I could save all the energy I kind of like filter out. But I take that filtered energy and I have another little component in there and that kind of twists it and helps run the filter more efficiently because I want the filter to be able to handle the volume coming in. So depending on the volume coming in, it filters as fast as it can. What it's filtering off is converting to essentially assist the filter into filtering faster. And it burns it off. It basically gives it a hyper boost to help it filter faster. Probably not the best description. I'm looking at it in my mind's eye, but it's not like anybody else here can see it. So that's the intake, and it goes in, and I, of course, it's basically check valved. Everything go in, can't come back out that way. And then it's held. But then for removal, I have, again, another filtration kind of on there. I don't want to say that energy stagnates, but essentially the energy that's going in there is coming from a lot of different sources. It's not just the reverse electric fence. And while you can filter and break down into some pretty basic components. Some energies are different than other energies. They just are. And you can get it down as far as you want to go with it, but I am not committing, I guess, the time or the resources to pulling it down to its most basic form. I'm taking the waves at the top of the ocean and I'm getting it down to the stuff that I usually like right before we drop off into the abyss, like right there. I'm getting it down to about there. Even when it's there, there is a little bit of a difference. So if I am picking up death energy and I am filtering out like a lot of the personality and I don't know, trauma or whatever's around that, it's still a death energy. And if I am pulling in a attack, or honestly, usually when they hit the reverse electric fence, it's not an attack, it's like a shock. That energy is coming in. Those are not the same energies. You can get them down to kind of impersonal, generic energies, but they are still fundamentally different energies, and you have to kind of recognize that. I do put them all in. I do let them mix in the tanks. We do get some interesting combos. When it comes time to pull that off to use it, that's where I have another, I call it a filtration system, but really it is more of a metamorphosis kind of system in which I am pulling it into, I'm going to say, I want to say like a little pot, but it's not. It's more contained than that. But I'm pulling in the volume that I need and then running that through a series of works, which basically gets it ready for me to use it. It converts it so that it is more what I would look for my average generic, okay, I'm going to take this and, I don't know, give it to an entity, or I have a little project to do and I'm going to start with my very vanilla basic energy and I'm going to build from there. Now, is it as snazzy and fancy as using straight up, I don't know, earth energy or lightning energy? No, it's not really. Again, it's very, very bland. On the other hand, I don't have to spend my own time or energy acquiring it. I've got huge tanks of it, and when I'm doing the filtration system, it's all basically, it runs its own filtration system. It does its own containment. I have this thing kind of self-sustains. So for me, if I want energy, it's just go get it, and then I can just use it. It's not as fancy. It's kind of basic. It certainly doesn't have the flavor, for lack of a better word, as some of the more raw energies around you in the like the physical world or some of these other planes. Would I use it for everything? No, I would not use it for everything. Will I use it for a lot of things? Yeah, I will. It's basically free. It has been collected through numerous systems. I've told you that I've tied it into the reverse electric fence, and I have. And I do siphon off extra energies when they're available and stick them there. But there are other sources feeding into this storage tank system as well. And I am kind of big into redundancies and backups. And I don't like to put all my eggs in one basket, so I am not using a single, I guess, funding source for my energy storage needs. I don't really need to store it, but I like to. It comes from multiple sources, there's multiple draws, and I find that it is easier to just have. I don't necessarily consider it to be unlimited, but many people would take a look at this and be like, wow, you have unlimited energy. If I wanted unlimited energy, there's another place I'd go to get it. But I have a substantial storage facility that I can access from anywhere at any time in any of my travels for whatever I need to do. So that is a nice backup. It is handy to have if I want to create something, if I just want to play and see if I can build something, influence something. I can set myself up in my workroom, astral workroom, not physical plane workroom. I can go where we kind of test everything, and I can go fool around in the testing area with the other entities, and I don't really have to worry about, do I need rosemary and a chalice and an altar and 17 crystals, and like how am I that's the least of my concerns, and it's usually not my concern at this point. The other thing I found it really handy for is I become very ill. I still have to work. I don't get like sick days. That's not going to happen here. I am sometimes quite ill and don't have the wherewithal to pull these energies from, like, I guess we're going to say more normal or natural locations and then bend them to my will and make them into what I need them to be. It's a whole lot easier to have a absolute vat of very generic, very plain energy just waiting for me to do whatever. It's just easier when you are under duress to know that you have, I guess, backup energy and a lot of it. I have used it once in a while to pay off entities. I sometimes just donate it. Like if there's something that needs it, I will kind of just provide it a little extra oomph for whatever it is that they want to achieve. I like to think of that as kind of like favors in the bank, and I do like to have favors in the bank. It's not costing me anything. Again, the tank system self-sustains. It feeds in from multiple places. At this point, I rarely think about that. The only thing that might catch my attention is if the alarms goes off, if something hits the reverse electric fence, or there's something going on in the tank system that sets off one of my little alerts. But otherwise, I really don't have to do anything with it. So it costs me nothing. It is incredibly handy to have. There's probably a dozen more uses that I'm not going to get into here. But I highly, highly recommend establishing a, I guess, backup energy source. I would be very careful about relying on other things to power your work. I guess I don't like to be dependent on anything, and I'm not really big on getting attached to anything. And we could argue that I'm kind of attached to the tank system, but I'm not a huge dependency person, and I really don't depend on my tank system. I do like it. I do find it handy. I don't know that I'm attached to it. Sometimes I forget about it. It's going to sound terrible. Sometimes I forget that it's even there, and it might be months before I'm like, oh, I wonder how that's doing. And then I'll kind of like take a little trip over and check it out. Always fun to try to check it out because the camouflage has gotten a little sophisticated over the years, and now sometimes even I have a little trouble picking it out. I know it's there. I know what I'm looking. I know like where to go for it, and it still hides a little bit from me on occasion. I'm happy with that. I'd rather have to kind of slow it down and pay attention than have it run the risk of being found. So that's a little bit on my tank storage system. I think I'll stop here for today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with others. If you have any questions or a topic you'd like to hear more about, you can contact me through my website, thesolitarypractice.com, and you'll have the option there. You can, leave me an email, brief voice message. As always, I appreciate you listening, and I truly do appreciate the feedback I received. Thanks again, and I will see you next week.